Hey guys, tonight we drift far back in time, to the 6th century BCE, when the heart of Western Anatolia glittered brighter than anywhere else on Earth. You stand on the steep red clay ridge above the valley of the Hermus River, watching sunlight spill over roofs and courtyards below. That shining maze is Sardis, capital of the kingdom of Lydia, a city so rich that even its dust carries the shimmer of gold. The morning air tastes of olives and dust. From every workshop comes rhythm, bronze struck on anvils, looms beating out patterns, vendors shouting in Lydian and Greek. The smell of wool dye and roasting sesame fills the streets, and always, from the stream that cuts through the city, the Pactolus River, you hear a soft hiss as the current drags flecks of electrum through the sand. People scoop the water with woven pans, hoping to catch a flash of sunlight that might change their fortunes. Here, wealth doesn't just flow, it glitters. At the highest point of Sardis rises the citadel, a sheer fortress of red stone. Its cliffs are so steep that the guards joke the walls are only there to keep eagles out. Within those walls lives King Croesus, the man the world calls the richest alive. His palace terraces gleam with marble and cedar. Lions of gold guard the gates. In his audience hall, merchants from every horizon wait their turn. Phrygians with horses, Greeks with amphorae, Phoenicians with purple cloth, and envoys from Babylon carrying spices and gossip. Coins stamped with a lion's head clink as hands change. Sardis hums like the centre of creation itself. Croesus has built more than a fortune, he's built confidence. His soldiers patrol in polished bronze, their helmets cresting like waves of sunlight. The Lydian cavalry, fast and proud, train on the plain below, their hooves drumming a rhythm that even the temple singers can't match. The priests of Cybele, the Great Mother, parade through the streets with flutes and drums trailing garlands of myrtle. Every sound, every shimmer, says the same thing: this will last forever. You wander the main avenue past arcades carved with griffins and lions, silk from the east, olive oil from the Aegean, silver from Phrygia. Everything finds its way here. Even ideas flow like trade winds. Greek sculptors work beside Lydian goldsmiths. Persian traders pray at Greek shrines. The city feels balanced between worlds, neither fully Eastern nor Western, but something dazzlingly in between. At sunset you climb the citadel steps as the valley sinks into shadow. Croesus stands on his balcony, a figure cut from the glow of the horizon. Below him, the Pactolus turns to liquid fire. Beyond it stretch fields of grain that feed half of Anatolia. "Look at that," he says softly, more to himself than anyone. "There is no city like mine." He isn't boasting. He's stating a fact everyone believes. Sardis is the crown of Asia Minor, the city that defines wealth itself. And yet, as the breeze rises from the east, carrying a faint taste of dry steppe and strange smoke, you feel a shiver that the king does not. Because beyond those distant hills, something vast is stirring. An empire of horsemen and fire, led by a man whose ambition will soon test every wall on earth. But for tonight Sardis sleeps in its golden glow. Lamps flicker in courtyards, lyres hum in taverns, the moonlight pools in the river like molten metal. The city feels immortal, untouchable, a dream built of light. You breathe in the scent of warm stone and honeyed wine and tell yourself what everyone here believes, that gold is forever. You just don't yet know that forever is shorter than it sounds. The first thing you notice about King Croesus isn't his crown, it's his calm. He doesn't need to prove anything. His city gleams in every direction like proof enough. The morning light pours through the palace's open colonnades, touching gilded lions, marble floors, and jars filled to the rim with stamped coins. Gold, everywhere. Thick, soft, endless. It spills from the walls, shines from the statues, and even glints from the threads of the king's robe as he moves through his hall. Croesus is not a warrior king like the ones in Greek stories. He's a builder, a patron, a strategist. He rules through prosperity, and no one can deny he's mastered it. He has done something no one else has dared. He has invented money as we know it. His mint in Sardis turns the dust of the Pactolus River into coins of electrum, purified to exact weights, each stamped with the image of a lion. They pass from hand to hand across the world, from Egypt to Athens. Before Croesus, wealth was weighed. After him, it circulates. The world suddenly has value it can carry in a pocket. He walks the city at dawn, disguised in a plain cloak, listening to the people barter in the agora. They greet him as if he were a merchant, and he smiles quietly at their talk. The price of oil, the worth of a horse, the rumour that Persian traders pay in silver because their empire bleeds gold. He loves this, the hum of trade, the pulse of movement. Sardis feels like the heart of something divine, but no amount of gold silences the restlessness of kings. Croesus is aging now. He has outlived rivals, inherited allies, and carved Lydia into a realm of gleaming comfort. Yet comfort is its own danger. His sons are grown but weak. His court is brilliant but lazy. His neighbours, Phrygia, Caria, Ionia, all orbit Sardis like moths around a flame. And beyond those distant frontiers there is a new power rising, still half legend, the Persians, led by Cyrus. At the evening banquet, envoys bring him news from the east. A tribal chieftain, who calls himself King of Kings, has defeated Media and united the plateau under his rule. Croesus listens with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Another warlord, he says, the east breeds them like locusts. Still that night he sends scouts and messengers to learn more. The next day he receives a visitor, a grey-bearded philosopher from Athens named Solon. Croesus welcomes him with the generosity of a man who thinks himself blessed. For days they walk the palace gardens together, fountains carved like lions, terraces bursting with jasmine and myrtle, courtyards paved in coloured stone. At last Croesus stops beside a basin of running water and asks, "Tell me, Solon, have you ever seen a happier man than I?" Solon studies him quietly, his eyes reflecting the gold tiles. "Happier? No," he says, "but happiness cannot be measured in gold. Count no man happy until his end is known." Croesus laughs. "So I must wait until I am dead to be happy?" The philosopher bows. Perhaps that is the only time a man's fortune can no longer turn. Croesus dismisses him politely. But later, as the palace grows silent, he sits alone beneath the flickering lamplight, running a gold coin through his fingers. The metal is warm from his touch, but somehow it feels heavier than before. He still believes in control, in the logic that wealth protects, that alliances endure. He strengthens ties with Babylon, signs treaties with Egypt, and builds shrines to Apollo and Artemis so magnificent that pilgrims travel from Greece to see them. His name becomes a proverb for wealth. Poets sing of him as a mortal rival to the gods, but the gods, as always, listen too closely. Late one night, Croesus dreams. He stands on his own balcony, watching Sardis burn. The Pactolus glows red instead of gold, and smoke covers the stars. A voice speaks from the darkness, calm, amused, familiar. Count no man happy until his end is known. He wakes drenched in sweat, the gold coin still in his hand. At dawn, he orders 100 bulls sacrificed to Apollo. His priests tell him the dream is nothing, just the fear of age, but he doesn't believe them. When a messenger arrives days later bearing word that the Persians have crossed into Cappadocia, Croesus feels something shift, destiny perhaps, or hubris. He looks out across his golden city, shining in the midday sun, and tells himself that no man, not even a barbarian from the east, can threaten a king whose walls gleam brighter than the heavens. And somewhere, far beyond those walls, Cyrus the Great smiles. The summer of 548 BCE presses down upon Sardis like a bronze lid. The heat ripples over the marble courtyards, and the scent of myrrh, sweat, and dust mingles in the air as Croesus paces before the altar of Apollo. The priests stand ready, their linen robes stiff with salt from old sacrifices, their faces painted with calm they do not feel. The king has grown restless, and when a man that rich grows restless, the world tends to tremble. Rumours have reached Sardis like flies. Cyrus of Persia, the upstart who called himself King of Kings, has crushed the Medes and taken Ecbatana. He now holds the high plains of Asia like a clenched fist. Word spreads that his armies move faster than birds, that his messengers never tire, that his men fight for glory instead of gold. For a king like Croesus, who measures the world in treasure, this is an alien kind of threat. But Croesus doesn't fear him yet. He wants clarity, divine clarity. So he sends messengers to every oracle known to man, to Delphi in Greece, where the Pythia breathes fumes and speaks for Apollo, to Ammon in the Libyan desert, where the god whispers through sand, to Dodona, where priests interpret the rustle of oak leaves, and to Miletus, where the priests of Branchidae chant beside the sea. His instructions are exact. On the 100th day from their departure, each messenger must ask the same question. What is Croesus, son of Aliat, doing now? Whichever oracle answers truthfully will be deemed the voice of the gods. And when that day arrives, Croesus does something only a wealthy skeptic would dream up. He orders a bronze pot placed upon a bronze lid and fills it with a tortoise and a lamb, boiling them together, a meal so bizarre no oracle could guess it by chance. Weeks later, the envoys return. Dusty, sunburned, half-starved, they kneel before him and hand over scrolls sealed in wax. The Delphic message is read aloud. I know the number of the sands and the measure of the sea. I understand the mute and hear the voiceless. The smell of a hard-shelled tortoise boiling with lamb's flesh strikes my senses. Bronze below, bronze above. Croesus stares at the parchment, his face pale with awe. Then he throws back his head and laughs. Not the nervous laugh of surprise, but the triumphant laugh of a man who has just confirmed the universe obeys him. Apollo is true, he cries. The god has spoken. The priests around him echo his joy, though some exchange uneasy glances. Croesus, never one to stop at faith when gold can do the talking, sends a train of wagons east to Delphi. They carry mountains of treasure, golden lions, goblets, ingots, and necklaces heavy enough to bow the priests' necks. When they arrive, the temple of Apollo glows so bright that travellers say the sun itself bends lower to see. In return, the Oracle of Delphi gives her fateful answer. If Croesus crosses the Halys River, he will destroy a great empire. The words echo through the marble halls of Sardis like music. Croesus smiles. Then the gods are with me. Only the old men of his council dare to frown. Which empire, my king? One asks softly. Yours or his? Croesus ignores him. Destiny, after all, favours the bold. He sacrifices 3,000 animals to the gods, their smoke spiralling into a blue sky. He sends for omens, but everyone seems to confirm the same thing. The gods approve. Even the flight of birds above the city forms a perfect V pointing east toward Persia. For days the palace rings with preparation. Armourers hammer through the night. Blacksmiths forge blades stamped with royal crests. Heralds gallop west to Sparta and Egypt, summoning allies. Croesus's heart burns with purpose. He will lead Lydia, the richest kingdom on earth, against this eastern conqueror and crush him. He will destroy a great empire. The night before departure, Croesus walks alone through his gardens. The stars shimmer above him like 1,000 tiny coins. He pauses beside the Pactolus River, its surface glinting with electrum dust, and whispers to the water, "You have made me the richest of kings. Now make me the greatest." The river murmurs softly, its voice like laughter in the dark. When dawn comes, the drums sound. Sardis opens its gates. The Lydian cavalry, shining in bronze and scarlet, rides east in perfect formation. Their hooves beat the earth like thunder as they cross the Halys River, the border between safety and doom. From the walls the people cheer, waving garlands of laurel and gold. Croesus raises his hand in farewell, confident, radiant, untouchable. He has the gods, the gold, and the world's richest city behind him. But the oracle's voice lingers in the wind. If Croesus crosses the Halys River, he will destroy a great empire. The question that no one dares to ask is, whose? The story shifts east, far beyond Lydia's green valleys and golden rivers, to a harsher world of wind, dust, and endless plains. The year is still 547 BCE, but here, in the heart of Persia, history breathes differently. The air smells of horse sweat and iron, not perfume. The land doesn't glitter, it glares. And rising from that glare is a man who will change the shape of the known world, Cyrus, son of Cambyses, called by his people Kurush the Great. You stand with him at sunrise on the high plateau of Anshan, where mountains guard the horizon and the sun breaks like fire over a sea of grass. His cloak is plain wool, his armour burnished but simple. Around him gather warriors, Medes, Persians, and mountain tribes united not by gold, but by faith in him. They call him King of Kings already, though his empire is barely born. Cyrus is nothing like Croesus. He has no palace of marble, no treasury overflowing with coins. His riches are measured in loyalty and in the sharpness of his mind. He is a soldier-philosopher, a man who speaks softly and listens more than he commands. He eats what his men eat, sleeps where they sleep. When he rides through the camp, even hardened soldiers straighten and grin. They know he's one of them, and somehow something more. His rise began years earlier when the Medes, masters of Persia, thought they could control him. His grandfather, the Median king Astyages, had dreamed that Cyrus would overthrow him, and tried to have him killed as an infant. But fate, amused as ever, had other plans. The child survived, grew up among shepherds, and returned one day at the head of an army. He overthrew his grandfather but spared his life, a mercy no one forgot. From that day on, Cyrus's legend spread faster than his soldiers could march. His conquests were lightning fast but astonishingly humane. When he entered a captured city, he didn't slaughter the inhabitants. He restored their temples and honoured their gods. When a defeated king surrendered, Cyrus treated him not as a trophy but as a governor. His empire grew not just by fear, but by admiration. By the time Croesus began consulting his oracles, Cyrus already ruled from the Caspian Sea to the edges of Mesopotamia. The Medes had been absorbed, the Elamites subdued, and the borderlands of Asia Minor trembled with rumour. His court, if you could call it that, was a moving city of tents. The air rang with the sound of hammering as blacksmiths shod horses, and the smell of roasting mutton drifted over the wind. His counsellors included generals, priests and scholars from half a dozen lands, men who had once fought against him and now rode at his side. When news reached him that Croesus of Lydia, that golden king from the far west, had crossed the Halys River and attacked his border at Cappadocia, Cyrus didn't rage. He smiled. "So," he said quietly, "the gods have sent me another teacher." For him, conquest wasn't an act of vengeance. It was destiny unfolding. He marched westward immediately, calling banners from every corner of his empire. The Medes, fierce archers with long hair tied in knots, joined him first. The Persians followed, lean and disciplined. Then came the nomads of the plains, their horses small but tireless, their arrows deadly in the wind. The march to Lydia was a symphony of hooves, drums, and dust. Through mountains and valleys, through frozen passes and sunburnt plains, the army moved like a single organism, tens of thousands of men bound by will. Each evening Cyrus walked the campfires, speaking to his captains not as a distant monarch but as a comrade. "The Lydian king believes gold can buy victory," he told them. "Let us show him what men without gold can do." When they reached Tyria, the frontier of Lydia, Cyrus found the land ravaged. Villages burned, crops seized, captives taken by Croesus's raiding parties. The Lydian king had struck first, testing Persian resolve. Cyrus rode among the ashes in silence, dismounting to lift a charred child's toy from the ground. "So," he said softly, "this is how he greets his neighbours." Then, more coldly, "Let him come back for what he started." Back in Sardis, Croesus celebrated prematurely, declaring victory because Cyrus had not yet counterattacked. He ordered his army to return home for the winter, confident the Persians, unaccustomed to cold, would do the same. But Cyrus didn't understand retreat. While Croesus feasted in his palace and sent letters to his allies, Egypt, Babylon, Sparta, Cyrus began his greatest march. Across frozen rivers and jagged ridges, his army pressed westward through sleet and darkness. They moved so fast the Lydian scouts didn't believe the reports. When the spring sun rose again, the banners of Persia were already flying on the plains of Lydia. The gods had spoken to both kings, but only one had listened. The winter winds sweep over Lydia's hills, bending the olive trees and chilling the vineyards. Inside the palace of Sardis, the fires roar, the tables groan under gold and roasted lamb, and Croesus laughs. The Persians, he believes, are retreating back to their cold mountains. The war has gone as planned. He will regroup, summon allies from Egypt, Babylon and Sparta, and crush Cyrus in the spring. You can almost taste the overconfidence in the air. It's rich and heavy like too much wine. The courtiers toast his name. The priests assure him that Apollo smiles. The city, lulled by victory, feasts beneath the winter moon. But east of the Halys River the snow is trampled by an army that never went home. Cyrus the Great moves silently through the frost, his campfires few, his soldiers marching by moonlight. He has studied Croesus's nature, proud, impulsive, predictable. The Lydian king believes in seasons of war, in pauses and preparations. Cyrus believes in opportunity. The Persians advance like ghosts. They move fast, burning nothing, taking nothing. Behind them, the ashes of Cappadocia cool beneath snow. Ahead of them lies Lydia, wealthy, complacent, unready. By early spring, word reaches Sardis that Persian banners have crossed the frontier. The news hits the palace like thunder. Croesus, startled mid-banquet, drops his golden goblet. He listens in silence as the messenger speaks. "The Persians are upon us, my king. They did not winter in Media, they march for Sardis." For a moment, Croesus just stares, as if trying to comprehend how reality dared to contradict him. Then his pride flares. "Then we'll meet them," he says coldly. "They think they can march into Lydia uninvited? We'll show them who owns the west." The horns sound across Sardis. Soldiers stumble from taverns. Blacksmiths light their forges. The Lydian cavalry, famed across the Aegean for their strength, gather in the plain of Timbra, their horses restless and gleaming in the early light. Croesus rides among them in gilded armour, his banners snapping in the cold wind, the Lion of Lydia blazing gold against crimson cloth. The army that forms around him is impressive, tens of thousands of men, disciplined and proud. Their shields are bronze, their spears long, their cavalry unmatched. Behind them trail chariots, slaves, merchants and priests, the cumbersome weight of a civilized army. They march east to meet the invader, confident the gods favour gold. But as you move with them, you can feel something else. A tension humming beneath the bravado. The peasants whisper of omens, birds flying eastward, the Pactolus running dark after a storm. Even the priests look uneasy when the wind blows from the east, carrying with it the smell of dust and smoke. Then, one morning near Tyria, the two armies finally meet. The air crackles with anticipation. Croesus watches from his chariot as the Persian ranks form. Smaller, leaner, quieter. Their armour is plain leather and iron, not bronze. Their formation loose, their archers many. Among them rides Cyrus himself, calm and still, as if already certain of the outcome. The Battle of Tyria begins at noon, under a sun as sharp as glass. Arrows darken the sky. The Persians advance in waves, their cavalry circling like wolves. Croesus commands the charge. The Lydian horsemen thunder forward, lances flashing, hooves shaking the plain. The collision is deafening. Bronze against bone, horses screaming, men falling. All afternoon the fighting surges back and forth. The Persians' arrows tear into the Lydian ranks, but the heavy cavalry smashes through their lines again and again. When the sun sinks behind the hills, neither side has won. Thousands lie dead, and the air stinks of iron and sweat. Night falls, and the two kings withdraw to opposite hillsides. Croesus counts it a draw, but he tells his men it's a victory. "We've shown them the might of Lydia," he declares. "Let them crawl home to their mountains." In his tent, Cyrus studies the battlefield by lamplight. His generals urge retreat. Their supplies are low, their men exhausted. But Cyrus simply smiles. He will go home, he says. He believes the world moves at his pace. And indeed, the next morning Croesus does exactly that. Following the logic of his ancestors, he disbands his mercenaries for winter, sends messengers to his allies, and rides back to Sardis. He plans to regroup in the spring and finish the war on his terms. But Cyrus does not wait for spring. He does not wait for allies. While the Lydian army scatters, the Persian host breaks camp at dawn and begins a march no one expects. Westward, straight into Lydia, through snow and rain, day after day, never stopping. In the taverns of Sardis, men joke that the Persians must have frozen to death. The priests offer thanks for their miraculous retreat. Croesus relaxes. He orders new gold vessels cast to dedicate to Apollo in gratitude. Then, one afternoon, a scout rides into the city at full gallop, his horse foam-flecked and bleeding from the spurs. "The Persians are coming," he gasps. "They are less than 5 days away." Silence falls. Croesus stares at him, disbelief curdling into rage. "Impossible," he says. "No army marches in winter." But somewhere in the east, beyond the hills of Lydia, a dark column of men and horses already moves through the cold, slow, steady, unstoppable. The Lydian lion, golden and proud, has turned its back too soon, and the Persian falcon has taken flight. The wind whips hard across the Anatolian plateau, carrying with it the dry sting of dust and smoke. It is the winter of 547 BCE, and the world feels like it's holding its breath. You stand with the Lydian army outside the ruins of Tyria, an old Hittite stronghold turned into a ghost city, its broken walls jagged against the horizon, its temples shattered by time. The ground beneath your boots is iron red, stained by centuries of forgotten wars. And now it's about to remember blood again. Across the plain, the Persians appear, a dark tide of men and horses. Their banners are simple, their armour mismatched, their formation loose, but they move with unnerving precision, each line falling into place like the unfolding of a plan written long before this day. The cold air hums with the sound of hoofbeats and iron. Croesus, wrapped in a crimson cloak and gold-trimmed armour, surveys them from his chariot. His generals urge him to strike first, to use the momentum of the Lydian cavalry, the most feared in Asia. "They're far from home," one says. "They have no winter stores." One blow and they'll break. Croesus nods. He believes this too. After all, no army can fight the Lydians on open ground. On the opposite ridge, Cyrus the Great sits astride his horse, calm, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He studies the Lydian lines, the heavy chariots, the glittering cavalry, the mass of infantry behind them, and exhales slowly. His generals murmur predictions of disaster. "Their horsemen will crush us." Cyrus doesn't answer. Instead, he dismounts, scoops a handful of soil and lets it fall from his palm. "Then we fight for this," he says, "and the earth will decide whose it is." At noon, the horns sound. The Lydians move first, an ocean of bronze and thunder. The cavalry surges forward, horses screaming, spears gleaming in the sun. The ground shakes, dust explodes around their hooves. It is the kind of charge that has broken every enemy Croesus has ever faced. But the Persians do not run. They tighten their ranks, shields overlapping, archers waiting. The first wave of arrows arcs upward, black lines against the blue sky, and falls like rain. Horses rear, riders curse, but the Lydians keep coming. When the lines meet, the sound is deafening. Iron clanging, men shouting, the crack of shields splintering. You see Cyrus riding through the chaos, calm as ever, shouting orders in a dozen tongues. His men fight like water, flowing around the heavier Lydians, striking fast, vanishing before counterattack. They've learned from the Medes, from the Assyrians, from every enemy who thought brute strength would save them. The battle rages until sunset. Croesus fights near the front, his spear flashing, his cloak soaked with sweat. He rallies his men again and again, but the Persians will not break. Their archers cut down anyone who strays. Their camels, strange beasts brought from the deserts, snarl and stink, scattering horses unused to their smell. The advantage of the Lydian cavalry begins to crumble. When night falls, both sides are still standing. Fires flicker across the plain, casting ghostly light on the dead. Neither army has won, neither can move forward. Croesus retreats to his camp, grim but defiant. "They could not defeat us," he tells his captains. "That is victory enough." But in the Persian camp, Cyrus smiles over a simple meal of bread and goat's milk. "They did not win," he says. "That is victory enough." For 3 days, the armies stare at each other across the cold plain. The wind howls through the ruins of Tyria, scattering ash and snow. Croesus, low on supplies, begins to waver. His allies, Egypt, Babylon, Sparta, are far away, their promised armies delayed by seas and distance. Lydia cannot sustain a long campaign in winter. At last, Croesus decides. He will withdraw to Sardis, regroup, call his allies, and crush Cyrus in spring. It is a decision that feels reasonable, even wise. Wars are won by patience as much as courage, and Sardis is impregnable. No enemy has ever taken it, so he gives the order. The Lydian army begins its slow retreat westward, leaving the Persians behind on the frozen plain. The drums fade, the banners dip, the hoofbeats fade into the distance. Behind them, the fires of Tyria burn out, leaving only smoke twisting up into the pale sky. Cyrus watches the horizon long after the last Lydian disappears. His generals urge pursuit, but he waits. He knows Croesus's habits. The Lydian king believes in rules: fight in season, rest in winter, trust in walls. Cyrus believes in none of those things. When night falls, he summons his captains. "We march at dawn," he says simply, "all the way to Sardis." The men stare. In winter. Cyrus's eyes gleam in the firelight. In victory. The decision spreads through the camp like a spark through dry grass. The next morning, the Persian army moves west, through sleet, through hunger, through exhaustion. They march not for plunder, but for destiny. Behind them, the wind erases their footprints. Ahead of them, the richest city in the world sleeps, unaware. Back in Sardis, Croesus celebrates what he thinks is peace. The temples are full, the wine flows, the laughter rings through marble halls. But at the edge of the empire, the horizon darkens with moving dust. The gods are not done speaking, and the empire that will fall is already chosen. The snow melts across Anatolia, feeding rivers that flash silver in the sunlight, and the Persian army moves like a shadow across the thawing plains. Their march westward is relentless. No rest, no pause, no mercy. Behind them, the campfires fade like fallen stars. Ahead of them, the roads to Sardis lie open and undefended. At their head rides Cyrus the Great, cloak whipping in the cold wind, eyes fixed on the horizon. He's already broken one rule of kingship, fighting through winter, and now he breaks another. Never chase a retreating enemy into his own heartland. But Cyrus doesn't believe in rules, he believes in momentum. Croesus has disbanded his army for the season, sent his mercenaries home, and allowed his confidence to dull his instincts. Cyrus knows it. He can almost taste the Lydian king's complacency. The march is brutal. The Persian soldiers trudge through mud and frost, their rations dwindling, their boots soaked, their hands raw. Yet none complain. Their leader eats what they eat, sleeps where they sleep. Each night he walks among the fires, speaking softly to the men in their own dialects, Median, Persian, Elamite, promising that the hardest road leads to the richest prize. Gold flows like water in Sardis, he tells them, and when we drink from that river, the world will know our names. The army cheers, even through cracked lips. They believe him. Far ahead, scouts report that the Lydian cavalry, those fabled horsemen with gilded armour and crimson plumes, are scattered across the countryside, unprepared for war. The roads are clear. The villages do not resist. They surrender with open hands, offering food and supplies. Some whisper blessings upon Cyrus's name. Others simply watch in awe as this army from the east, half myth, half storm, passes through their land like a force of nature. When the Persians reach the plains of Sardis, the valley bursts into view, a land of vineyards, orchards, and the gleaming river Pactolus, its sands sparkling with gold dust. And above it all, perched on a sheer cliff, rises the city itself, Sardis, the jewel of Lydia, walls red as clay and towers crowned with bronze. It looks unassailable, a mountain sculpted into a fortress. Cyrus studies it for a long moment. "Magnificent," he murmurs, "but even eagles have nests that can be reached." He orders his army to make camp across the plain, so close that the smoke of their fires drifts toward the city. His generals look uneasy. "We should rest," one says. "Wait for reinforcements, perhaps from the east." Cyrus shakes his head. "If we wait, he will call his allies, Egypt, Babylon, Sparta. The time to strike a lion is when he sleeps. Inside Sardis, Croesus is jolted from his comfort by the thunder of war drums. He can hardly believe the reports. The Persians are here, now, without warning, without rest, without fear. His first reaction is disbelief, then anger. "Fools! No army marches through winter," he roars, but the truth stands outside his walls, dust rising like smoke from the Persian camp. He scrambles to summon what soldiers remain, palace guards, militia, a few hundred mercenaries who hadn't yet left. He sends frantic messengers south and west, calling his allies for aid, but the distances are too great, the roads too long, help will not come in time. That night the fires of Sardis burn bright against the dark. From the walls you can see the Persian torches spread across the plains like constellations fallen to earth. The citizens huddle in fear. The priests chant hymns to Apollo and Artemis, begging for divine protection. Croesus rides along the battlements, looking down at the enemy lines. For the first time in his reign, his gold feels useless. It cannot bribe the wind or stop the march of time. The next morning, the Persians move closer. Their ranks form in silence, their banners snapping in the cold wind. Croesus's generals gather around him on the city walls. "We should sally forth, my king," one says, "before they surround us." Croesus hesitates. To charge means risk, to wait means siege, but his pride wins out. "Very well," he says, gripping the reins. "We will show these barbarians what it means to face the armies of Lydia." The gates of Sardis creak open. The cavalry pours out, shining, fierce, desperate. The ground shakes under the hooves of hundreds of horses. The Lydian trumpets blare, echoing off the cliffs. Cyrus watches from a low hill, calm as a statue. He raises one hand. "Release the camels," he says. From behind the Persian lines, a strange sight emerges. Hundreds of camels laden with supplies herded forward into the battlefield. The smell of them, thick and sharp, floods the air. The Lydian horses rear in panic. They've never encountered such creatures. Their formation breaks. Cyrus's infantry charges through the chaos. The camels, grunting and spitting, create a living wall that splits the Lydian ranks apart. The Persian archers rain arrows into the confusion. Croesus, trying to rally his men, finds himself surrounded by panic and dust. His cavalry, once his pride, becomes useless. By noon, the plain is covered in bodies. The Lydian lines crumble. Croesus barely escapes with a handful of men, retreating to the safety of Sardis's walls. The gates slam shut behind him. The Persians cheer. The camels groan. Cyrus surveys the battlefield, his expression unreadable. "He's trapped now," he says. "The lion is in his cage." That night, Croesus stands on the ramparts, staring down at the Persian campfires below. They stretch for miles, flickering like an ocean of stars. He knows now that he has misread the gods, misread the prophecy, misread everything. A great empire will fall, the oracle had said. He just hadn't realized it would be his. The morning of the Battle of Timbra dawns cold and colourless, the sky a dull sheet of grey. Frost clings to the grass and the smell of smoke from Persian campfires drifts across the plain. You stand with Cyrus the Great, his cloak pulled tight against the wind, his gaze fixed on the distant walls of Sardis. Beyond them lies the richest city in the world, the prize of kings. But today's battle will decide who claims it. The Lydians, desperate and proud, march out of their gates in a final show of defiance. At their head rides Croesus, his golden armour gleaming even beneath the pale light, the lion banner snapping in the wind. Behind him thunder the famed Lydian cavalry, their horses snorting clouds of steam, their spears tipped with bronze. The infantry follows, shields bright as mirrors, chanting the old hymns of Anatolia, songs of victory, songs that have never been silenced before. The Persians wait on the open plain, their armies smaller but leaner, arranged with mathematical precision. Cyrus's mind has been working through the night, turning the battlefield into a board for his genius. He knows the Lydian cavalry is their greatest weapon, so he will turn it against them. He orders his front line to form with camels, taken from his baggage trains, arranged in a living wall. Their stench fills the air, and the Lydian horses begin to whinny nervously even before the charge begins. Behind them, Persian infantry brace their shields, and the archers ready their bows. The two armies face each other in silence. The wind dies. For a heartbeat, the world seems to stop. Then, with a roar that shakes the air, the Lydians charge. The sound is overwhelming. Hooves pounding like drums, trumpets blaring, men shouting. The earth itself seems to move. Croesus stands at the forefront, his spear raised high, his cloak streaming behind him like a banner of fire. He believes the gods still favour him, that his courage and his wealth will buy victory one last time. But as his cavalry closes the distance, the Persian camels let out a collective groan, low, guttural, unnatural. The horses panic instantly. They rear, spin, and bolt, throwing riders or crashing into one another. The formation collapses in chaos. Spears clatter to the ground. Cyrus lifts his hand. "Now," he says. The Persian archers unleash their arrows. Thousands of shafts hiss through the air, darkening the grey sky. They fall into the broken Lydian ranks like rain. Men scream. Horses crash. Shields splinter. The Lydian front line disintegrates before it even reaches the Persian spears. Still, Croesus fights on. He rallies what cavalry he can, drives them forward on foot when their mounts refuse to move. "For Lydia!" he shouts. "For Sardis!" The soldiers follow him, their courage desperate, almost beautiful. The clash becomes a storm of iron and fury. You see Cyrus move like a conductor among the chaos, sending flanking units to encircle the Lydians. His infantry spreads wide, drawing the enemy inward, tightening the noose. The camels advance again, groaning, driving the Lydians deeper into confusion. Dust and blood fill the air until the horizon vanishes. For hours the battle rages. The plain of Thimbra becomes a churned field of corpses, shattered spears, and discarded shields. The sound of dying horses carries far into the hills. When the sun reaches its zenith, the outcome is no longer in doubt. Cyrus orders his reserves, or the elite Persian guard, to move in for the final blow. They strike the Lydian flank like a hammer. The last pockets of resistance collapse. Croesus, wounded and bleeding, is pulled from the field by his remaining guards. His chariot lies overturned, his banner trampled. The golden lion of Lydia falls into the dust. By sunset, the battle is over. The field is silent except for the crackle of fires and the groans of the dying. The Persians move among the fallen, gathering weapons, tending to their own wounded, offering water even to their enemies. Cyrus rides through the aftermath, his face solemn, his victory complete. He halts near a shattered Lydian standard and dismounts. The banner's golden thread catches the dying light, the lion's eyes staring sightlessly toward the mountains. Cyrus kneels, brushes the dirt from it, and says quietly, "Even lions can fall." In the distance, the walls of Sardis glow red with the reflection of sunset. Croesus has fled there with what remains of his army. The city's gates are closed, the drawbridges raised, the defenders shouting defiance from the towers. Cyrus surveys the scene, his generals waiting for orders. "We end it now," he says, "before he finds hope again." The Persian army begins to move, slow, deliberate, inevitable, toward the city that once believed itself untouchable. Inside Sardis, Croesus leans on the walls, his armor dented, his pride broken. He watches the Persian torches spreading across the plain like a second night sky and whispers a prayer to Apollo. But the god who once promised him victory is silent now, and beneath the cold Anatolian stars, the richest man alive finally understands what the oracle meant. A great empire has fallen, and it was his own. The sun dips low over the plain of Thimbra, bleeding red light through the haze of dust and smoke. The battle is over, and the air is heavy with silence, that terrible waiting silence that follows defeat. You stand with the remnants of the Lydian army, faces grey with exhaustion, armour dented and blood-stained. The once proud cavalry, the pride of Anatolia, is gone, scattered, broken, humiliated by camels and archers from a land they once called barbarian. At the edge of the battlefield, Croesus sits slumped on a shattered chariot wheel. His armour, once gleaming gold, is dull and smeared with grime. His hands shake as he tries to clean the blood from his sword. though he no longer knows whose blood it is, his men's, his enemies', or his own pride. The wind catches the torn banner beside him, its golden lion flapping limply like a wounded bird. Around him, the survivors gather, a few hundred men, some limping, some carrying the wounded. The king's captains urge him to flee. "Sire, the Persians are closing in. The plain is lost. We must reach Sardis before they surround us." Croesus raises his head, eyes burning with disbelief and rage. "Sardis cannot fall," he mutters, as if saying it aloud will make it true. "No army can take her walls." He mounts his horse, a trembling, exhausted beast, and looks back across the plain. Fires burn where his army once stood. The sound of distant horns rolls over the hills. He turns away. "To Sardis," he says quietly. "We'll make our stand there." The retreat begins under cover of night. The Lydian survivors move like ghosts, slipping through ravines and olive groves, their torches hidden, their breath misting in the cold air. The moonlight gleams faintly on broken armour as they pass through the fields of their own homeland. Fields now trampled by the enemy. Behind them, the Persians pursue, silent and steady. The hooves of their horses sound like the heartbeat of fate itself, drawing closer with every hour. When the battered column finally crests the ridge overlooking Sardis, dawn is breaking. The city looks like salvation, its red walls glowing in the morning light, its citadel rising above the valley like a crown. From this distance it seems eternal, indestructible. For the first time since the battle, Croesus smiles. "Home," he whispers. The gates open for him with shouts of relief. Crowds rush into the streets to welcome their king, cheering, reaching out to touch his cloak. They still believe he has returned victorious. After all, isn't Croesus favoured by the gods? But when they see the blood on his armour and the haunted look in his eyes, the cheers falter. He rides through the streets in silence, past temples he built, fountains he endowed, palaces he filled with gold. The people bow, but their faith begins to tremble. Inside the citadel, Croesus gathers his remaining officers. Maps litter the table, coins scattered like tears across the parchment. "The Persians will reach us within 2 days," he says. "We'll hold the city until our allies arrive. Egypt, Babylon, Sparta, they owe me their swords." One general clears his throat. "My king, it will take weeks for their armies to reach us. If Cyrus surrounds us..." Croesus slams his fist on the table. "If!" Sardis is impregnable. These walls have never fallen. He glares around the room, daring anyone to disagree. None do, though in the silence, you can feel the truth pressing in. That night, he walks alone along the battlements. The city spreads beneath him, lamps glowing faintly in the streets, the Pactolus River winding like a golden thread through the valley. For years, that river's gold made him invincible. Now it feels like mockery, gleaming, eternal, indifferent. He remembers the oracle's words. If Croesus crosses the Halys, he will destroy a great empire. He whispers them to the wind bitterly. "You were right, Apollo. You just didn't tell me who's below." In the dark fields the first Persian scouts appear, torches glinting like fireflies in the distance. The siege has begun. In the city fear spreads like smoke. Families stock their cellars. Priests chant through the night. The once proud soldiers of Lydia line the walls with trembling hands. From the temples of Cybele to the shrines of Artemis, the prayers all sound the same. "O gods, let the Persians pass us by." But the gods are silent. By morning, the hills around Sardis are alive with movement. Persian tents rise like a second city, their banners snapping in the wind. From the citadel, Croesus can see Cyrus's camp. Ordered, calm, efficient. No chaos, no indulgence, no pride, just purpose. The contrast is unbearable. In the council chamber, Croesus tries to rally his court. "The Persians have no siege engines," he insists. "Our walls are unscalable. We have food for months. Sardis has stood for centuries. It will stand for centuries more." The nobles nod, murmuring agreement, though their faces are pale. None of them notice that the king's hands are shaking. That evening, as the fires of the Persian camp flicker below, Croesus stands again on the balcony, where he once admired his golden city and thinks of Solon, the Athenian sage who told him no man could be called happy until his end was known. Back then he had laughed. Now he understands. The gold, the temples, the feasts, all dust. What remains is the waiting, the cold, the ache of regret. And somewhere below in the Persian camp, Cyrus gazes up at the shining walls and whispers to his captains, "Tomorrow we take the lion's den." The war that began with prophecy is about to end in flame. The first Persian arrows fall just after dawn. You hear them before you see them, the hiss of feathers cutting through the cold morning air, then the dull, wet thud as they strike the outer walls. Men on the battlements shout and duck for cover. One drops silently, an arrow buried deep in his neck. The siege of Sardis has begun. From your place on the ramparts, you can see the Persian army stretching across the valley like a bronze sea. Their tents glint in the sunlight, their banners ripple in the wind, and beyond them, the smoke of countless campfires curls into the pale sky. Cyrus the Great has arrived, and this time he's not marching through. He's staying until the city falls. Inside Sardis, the mood is feverish. The clang of hammers fills the streets as blacksmiths repair weapons. The priests burn incense in every temple, their chants mixing with the cries of frightened children. The smell of fear and smoke thickens the air. The citizens whisper that the gods have turned their faces away, that Apollo no longer listens, that Croesus's pride has angered the heavens. But the king refuses despair. He walks the walls in full armour, his lion-emblazoned cloak snapping in the wind. His voice, once silken and calm, is now hard and clipped. "Hold the walls," he commands. "The Persians cannot climb cliffs. Sardis has never fallen, and it never will from the heights of the citadel, it seems true. Sardis's defences are legend, sheer slopes of red stone rising like natural fortresses, towers built into the rock, walls said to touch the sky. The Persians may circle, may shout, may burn, but they cannot fly, or so Croesus believes. Down below, Cyrus studies the city with the patience of a man unhurried by pride. He knows Sardis's history, its arrogance, its weakness. The Lydians are strong, yes, but they're accustomed to luxury, not endurance. He tells his captains to cut the roads, capture the wells, block the river crossings. "Let hunger and silence be our allies," he says. "They will work harder than any sword." Days stretch into weeks. The Persians build siege mounds, test the walls, loose volleys of arrows. Lydian defenders hurl stones, pour boiling oil, light the night with fire pots. The air fills with the constant thrum of combat, a deadly rhythm that never stops, not even in sleep. The citizens of Sardis, trapped behind their golden walls, begin to change. The markets fall silent, the fountains run dry. In the temples, offerings pile high, gold, silver, jewels, but the gods remain mute. Croesus stalks the palace halls at night, his footsteps echoing against marble. Servants hide when they see him coming. He no longer speaks to anyone but the statues of his ancestors, whose eyes of carved lapis seem to watch him with quiet reproach. One evening, a messenger bursts into the throne room, breathless and bleeding. "The Persians have taken the lower town," he gasps. "They've breached the first gate." Croesus's hand tightens around his sword. "They will not take the citadel," he says through his teeth. The Lydians fall back to the inner walls, that final impregnable height above the valley. They watch as smoke rises from the burning houses below, the flames reflected in the gold of their own temples. For the first time in memory, the Pactolus River runs dark with ash instead of gold dust. From the Persian camp, Cyrus watches the city's lower terraces burn. His captains urge him to storm the heights, but he shakes his head. "You cannot take Sardis by force," he says. "You must take it by thought." That night he calls for Hieroides, one of his soldiers, a quiet man, sharp-eyed and restless. Cyrus gestures toward the citadel's cliffs. "They say no one can climb those walls," he says. "Do you believe it?" Hieroides squints up at the steep red rock where the walls meet the sky. "Every wall has a flaw," he says simply. "Then find it," Cyrus replies. The next morning the Persians feign retreat on one side of the city, drawing Lydian eyes to the plains. Meanwhile, Hyrides and a handful of men slip toward the northern cliffs, a place so steep the guards rarely watch it. They climb in silence, using cracks in the rock and roots for handholds. Halfway up, one slips, nearly falling, but Hyrides grabs him by the wrist, whispering, "Quiet! The gods are watching." It takes hours, but by dusk they reach the top. To their astonishment, the battlements are empty. The Lydian guards, certain no one could possibly ascend, have grown careless, some even asleep in the towers. Hyriades signals to the valley below. The Persians begin their silent ascent. In the palace, Croesus stands before the altar of Apollo, staring into the dying flames. His golden crown lies forgotten beside him. The thunder of battle fades for a moment, replaced by something worse, the stillness of inevitability. Then, from somewhere high above, comes the sound of shouting. He rushes to the balcony and freezes. On the northern wall, Persian banners are rising. The first scream echoes through the night, distant, confused, impossible. For a heartbeat, no one on the walls of Sardis believes it. Then comes another, closer this time, sharp with terror. The guards on the northern cliffs turn toward the sound, squinting into the dark, and what they see freezes their blood. Torchlight. High on the ridge where the cliffs are nearly vertical, where even birds struggle to land, Persian soldiers are climbing. You can see their shapes outlined in the faint glow, their armour dull against the rock, their movements slow but sure. At their head is Hyrides, the man Cyrus sent to find a flaw in the city no one thought had any. And now he's found it. The unthinkable is happening. The Persians are scaling the impassable wall. Alarms shatter the silence. The horns of Sardis blare, echoing off the cliffs. Guards rush to the northern towers, shouting, fumbling for bows and spears, but it's too late. By the time they reach the parapets, the first Persians are already climbing over, hauling each other up by belts and hands. A spear flashes in the torchlight. One Lydian soldier collapses with a cry. Another stumbles backward, his own weapon clattering down the slope. Panic spreads like fire through the fortress. From his chamber in the citadel, Croesus hears the noise, the clash of steel, the roar of voices, the sudden eruption of chaos. He runs to the balcony. The night below him is alive with light. Persian torches flaring up the cliffside, arrows arching across the dark. His city, his invincible Sardis, is under attack from the one direction no one guarded. "The cliffs!" a captain gasps as he bursts in. "They've scaled the cliffs!" Croesus stares at him, speechless. "Impossible," he whispers, but the screams outside prove otherwise. He seizes his sword and rushes through the corridors, shouting for his men. "To the northern wall! Hold them off." His boots strike marble, his voice echoes through empty halls. He passes courtiers and servants fleeing in terror, priests carrying relics, soldiers grabbing armour half-buckled. When he reaches the battlements, the scene is madness. Persians pour over the walls like a flood, fast, disciplined, unstoppable. The Lydian defenders, scattered and shocked, fight in small knots of resistance. You can smell the fire and sweat, hear the clang of iron and the dull thud of bodies hitting stone. Croesus fights like a man possessed. His blade cuts through the smoke. His voice rises above the din, "For Lydia, for your homes." But every command feels smaller, swallowed by the tide. For every Persian who falls, two more climb the cliffs. By dawn, the outer walls are lost. The Persians move swiftly through the streets, their banners catching the wind. From the towers, arrows rain down in both directions, friend and foe blurred by chaos. Civilians scream, doors slam, the marketplace becomes a battlefield. The Pactolus River, once the city's golden vein, runs red with blood. Croesus falls back toward the citadel with the last of his guards. Smoke rises behind him, black and oily, blotting out the sun. He stops once on the palace steps and looks back at the burning rooftops of Sardis. He had always imagined the end of his reign bathed in gold and song. Instead, it burns in silence. In the distance, the gates of the lower city burst open, the Persian army flooding through, disciplined even in victory. Cyrus rides at their head, his expression calm, almost sorrowful. To him, this is not conquest for glory. It is the conclusion of inevitability. He orders his men to spare those who surrender. "Take the city, but not its soul," he says. There has been enough death for the gods to notice. When his soldiers reach the palace, Croesus is waiting. The battle has drained him. His sword is broken, his armour dented, his crown gone. For the first time, the richest man in the world looks small, just another mortal in the path of empire. The Persian captain salutes him. "My lord, the city is yours." Cyrus dismounts, stepping lightly over the debris of battle. He looks at Croesus, the golden king reduced to ashes, and says softly, "You are the one the gods warned me of." Croesus meets his gaze, his voice hollow, "And you are the one they warned me of." For a long moment neither speaks. The wind moans through the shattered gates. The city of Sardis, once the jewel of the world, lies broken behind them. Its walls torn open, its temples looted, its streets littered with the remains of its pride. Then Cyrus says, "Come with me." Your war is over. Croesus doesn't resist. He lowers his head and follows. As they leave the smoking ruins behind, the morning light catches the Pactolus River one last time. Its surface still glimmers faintly, not with gold, but with ashes. The smoke rises in twisting black columns above Sardis, turning the bright Anatolian morning into a dim copper haze. The air tastes of salt and metal. From the palace terrace you can see the entire city sprawled below. The markets where merchants once sold silks and spices, the temples that glittered with gold, the river Pactolus glinting like a dying ember beneath the veil of smoke. The city that once defined wealth now lies in ruin. The Persians move methodically through the streets. They are not looters, not yet. They are soldiers of an empire that believes in order more than vengeance. Cyrus's discipline holds them in check. His command is clear. No senseless blood, no needless flame. Even so, Sardis burns. Fires started during the night still crawl through the lower city, devouring wooden rooftops and collapsing stone walls. The screams have faded, replaced by the dull hum of ruin, the sound of empire settling over its new prize. At the citadel gates, the surviving Lydian soldiers are herded together, stripped of their arms but not their dignity. Their faces are blank, their armour dented and soot-stained. Some look upward toward the palace where the red banners of Cyrus now hang. Inside that palace, once Croesus's throne of gold and cedar, the conqueror and the conquered meet again. Croesus, still dressed in his torn armour, stands barefoot on the marble floor. His golden bracelets are gone, his hair is matted with ash. Around him lie the shattered remains of his empire. Scrolls, coins, ceremonial weapons. Everything he thought would last forever. Yet even in defeat, he stands straight. Cyrus the Great enters quietly, his armour dusty from battle, his expression calm. He does not stride like a conqueror, but walk like a judge. Behind him trail a few officers, silent, watchful. For a long moment, the two kings regard each other in silence. Cyrus breaks it first. "You are the greatest of the kings of the West," he says softly. "Your wealth filled the earth. Why did you raise your sword against me?" Croesus lifts his head. His voice is hoarse but steady. "Because I believed I could. Because I believed I should. Because the gods told me I would destroy a great empire." Cyrus's lips curl faintly. "And so you did." The words hang in the air, cold and cruel in their truth. Croesus almost laughs. A broken sound, half despair, half clarity. "They warned me. Solon warned me. But who listens to philosophers when the gold runs thick?" He sinks slowly to his knees, staring at his hands. Hands that once signed decrees, grasped jewels, flung coins to cheering crowds. "It seems," he murmurs, "that fortune is a wheel, and I've ridden it too long on one side." Cyrus studies him in silence. He's seen this before. Kings who fell to arrogance, men who mistook power for permanence. Yet something in Croesus's quiet resignation stirs him. This is not a man begging for mercy. It's a man who has already met his judgment. "Come," Cyrus says finally. "You will not die here. You will see what rises from what you built." The Persian guards lead Croesus through the ruined streets. The citizens of Sardis line the roads. Silent, hollow-eyed, too stunned for hatred. Some kneel as he passes, others turn away. He was their son once. Now he's just another shadow. They pass the burned-out marketplace where merchants once shouted prices. Coins glimmer in the ash like stars reflected in a grave. They pass the temple of Cybele, its great bronze doors warped by heat, the statue of the goddess cracked and blackened. At the base of her altar, a small boy places a single flower, the only act of worship left in a city of disbelief. Outside the gates, the Persian army waits in perfect formation. Cyrus climbs a hill overlooking the valley, the same valley where his army had camped before the siege. Croesus follows, limping until they reach the top. From there you can see the full sweep of Lydia, fields, rivers, villages, and at its heart the broken crown of Sardis. Cyrus turns to his officers. "Let the city live," he commands. "Its people will rebuild and trade again, but for Persia, not for gold." His men bow. The decree spreads through the ranks. No massacre, no ruin beyond repair. Sardis will live, not as a kingdom, but as a province of empire. Croesus watches the city shimmer through the haze. He feels something like gratitude, though it burns his pride to admit it. "You are merciful," he says, "more than I would have been." Cyrus nods once. "Perhaps that's why the gods gave me your empire." Below, Persian engineers are already at work, measuring, planning, restoring order. Soldiers clear debris, feed captives, guard the temples that still stand. The rhythm of conquest gives way to the rhythm of rule. Croesus looks up at the sky. The clouds have begun to part, and for a moment a shaft of sunlight breaks through, catching on the soot-covered towers of his fallen city. They gleam faintly, like gold beneath dust. He closes his eyes. "So it ends," he murmurs. Cyrus glances at him. "No," he says quietly, "it begins." For Persia, it is the dawn of empire. For Lydia, it is the twilight of everything that glittered. And as the sun sets over the smoking ruins of Sardis, you can almost hear the whisper of the gods in the wind, not cruel, not mocking, just inevitable. All that shines must burn, and all that burns must fade. The flames still lick the broken skyline of Sardis when the final act begins, quiet, deliberate, inevitable. The Lydian king who once ruled half of Anatolia now stands beneath the Persian banners, his wrists bound in bronze. His crown lies somewhere in the ashes of his palace, melted into a puddle of gold. Around him, soldiers whisper his name, not as a monarch but as a lesson. Croesus, the richest man alive. Croesus, who thought wealth meant safety. Croesus, who gambled with the gods and lost. He's led through the ruins under guard. The people who once cheered his parades now avert their eyes. The air smells of smoke and wet stone, and every street feels smaller than he remembers. The walls, once symbols of pride, are now tombstones of his ambition. At the edge of the burned agora, the Persian captains await Cyrus. Their leader stands upon the temple steps gazing down at his prisoner. He is calm as ever, the conqueror who does not need to shout. "Bring him forward," Cyrus says. Croesus steps out into the open. The wind tugs at his tattered cloak, his bare feet leaving tracks in the ash. He looks up at the man who ended his world, younger, simpler, harder, and for a moment says nothing. Cyrus regards him in silence. "You fought well," he says at last, "and you ruled a great kingdom. Why throw it away for prophecy and pride?" Croesus gives a short, bitter laugh. "Because prophecy and pride are the same thing when you're a king." A faint smile flickers across Cyrus's face. Not mockery, but understanding. "You believed the gods favoured you." "I believed gold could make them favour me," Croesus replies. "It seems they were not impressed." Cyrus studies him. "Do you know what I learned from watching your city burn?" Croesus raises his head. "That fortune is fickle?" "That mercy," Cyrus says softly, "is stronger than conquest." He turns to his guards. "Unbind him." The soldiers hesitate. One speaks up, nervous. "My lord, the Lydian king fought against us. His people slew our men." Cyrus doesn't raise his voice. "Unbind him." The chains fall. Croesus rubs his wrists, staring at the marks the bronze left behind. Freedom feels strange, lighter than gold, but sharper too. "Why?" he asks. You won. Why spare me? Cyrus looks out toward the smoking ruins of Sardis. Because I might one day stand where you stand, and I would want the same mercy. But not everyone in the Persian ranks shares his restraint. Some of his generals murmur that the Lydian king deserves a lesson, a reminder to the world that rebellion against Persia ends in fire. The crowd of soldiers grows restless, hungry for spectacle. Cyrus sighs. You see what my own men crave, he says quietly. They call it justice. I call it impatience. He gestures toward a pile of stones. Build a pyre, he orders, almost sadly. Let us test whether the gods who loved Croesus still listen. The soldiers move quickly, stacking dry timber in the courtyard of the ruined temple. The wind stirs the smoke from the city into ghostly spirals. Croesus is led to the platform, bound again, though more gently this time. The Persians form a circle, faces lit by torchlight. Cyrus steps forward. You claim the gods were with you, he says. If they are, they can save you now. Croesus meets his gaze without flinching. I thought I understood the gods, he murmurs, but perhaps they only speak in riddles. The torches touch the base of the pyre. Flames crawl upward, slow at first, then faster, reaching toward the bound king. The heat rises, the air crackles. The soldiers murmur prayers, some in Persian, some in Median, some even in Lydian. And then, through the roar of the fire, Croesus cries out, not in pain, but in remembrance. Solon! Solon, Cyrus frowns. Who is Solon? The wisest man I ever met, Croesus gasps, his voice carrying over the flames. He told me no man is happy until his end is known. The words hang in the air. The fire flickers higher, then, inexplicably, shifts. A gust of wind sweeps down from the cliffs, scattering the flames, bending them away from Croesus. The ropes smoulder but do not burn through his flesh. The crowd stares, murmuring. Cyrus raises a hand. Stop. The fire is doused. Smoke curls into the sky. The soldiers stand in uneasy silence, as if the gods themselves have intervened. Cyrus steps forward, eyes on Croesus. You are favoured after all, he says softly, perhaps by wisdom, not by gold. He orders the king released again. Croesus sinks to his knees, coughing, trembling, the heat still shimmering in the air. He looks up at his conqueror and whispers, Perhaps the gods love both of us and in different ways. Cyrus helps him to his feet. Then let us honour them both, he says. And so the richest man in the world, the king who thought gold made him untouchable, is spared by the mercy of the man who conquered him. As the fires of Sardis burn behind them, Cyrus turns to his soldiers. Remember this, he says. We build empires not with arrogance, but with restraint. The wind carries the smell of smoke and ash up into the hills, where the Pactolus river still glimmers faintly beneath the dawn. Sardis has fallen, but something new has risen. Not just an empire of Persia, but a moment of humanity carved into the chaos of conquest. The pyre still smoulders in the courtyard when the first light of dawn touches Sardis. Smoke curls upward in thin grey ribbons, carrying with it the scent of charred wood and wet ash. The Persian soldiers, who only hours before had expected to witness an execution, now whisper of a miracle. The fire that should have consumed Croesus turned aside as though a divine hand had passed through it. Some call it luck. Others say Apollo himself intervened. But for Cyrus it is something stranger, a lesson written in flame. You stand beside him as he watches Croesus, the former king, now wrapped in a plain woolen cloak, sitting quietly on the temple steps. His golden crown has melted, his wealth vanished, but his gaze is steady, his voice unbroken. When Cyrus approaches, Croesus rises, leaning on a Persian guard's arm. You see, he says softly, the gods speak, but never plainly. They burned my pride, not my flesh. Cyrus studies him, half sceptical, half awed. Perhaps the fire chose to shame me instead, he says. I meant to show the world Persia's strength, and instead I showed its impatience. Croesus smiles faintly. Even kings learn. A strange peace has settled between them, the conqueror and the conquered, now bound by something larger than power. For the first time, Cyrus does not see an enemy. He sees a mirror, Another man crushed by destiny's wheel, yet somehow still human beneath the weight of crowns. He gestures toward the rising sun. "Come," he says, "you will send word to Delphi." "Tell your god what has happened here." Croesus nods. "Yes," he says, "for he should know that his prophecy was fulfilled, though not as I imagined." He sends messengers to the Oracle at Delphi bearing gifts of gratitude, not for victory, but for truth. The priests there later record his words, "The god was right. I did destroy a great empire, my own." In Sardis, life begins to shift from chaos to order. The Persian engineers repair the walls, the markets reopen. Cyrus spares the temples, pays the priests, and forbids his soldiers from looting the homes of the poor. "Let them see that conquest does not always mean ruin," he tells his generals. His empire will not be built on ashes, but on allegiance. And Croesus, once the most powerful man in the West, becomes his advisor. It is a role born of irony, but also of mutual respect. Croesus knows the languages of merchants and kings, the subtle ways of diplomacy that gold once bought him. He teaches Cyrus how to rule the conquered not as slaves but as subjects, a lesson Persia will carry for generations. At night, the two men talk beneath the pale Anatolian stars. Cyrus asks of Greece, of Egypt, of the cities that glitter across the sea. Croesus answers, weaving tales of Athenian philosophers and Egyptian priests, of kings who rose too fast and gods who remained silent. One evening, as they sit beside a fire, Cyrus asks quietly, "Tell me, when the oracle warned you that you would destroy a great empire, why did you not question which one?" Croesus gazes into the flames. "Because I wanted to believe it would be his, not mine," he says. "We never ask questions that might hurt the answer we want." Cyrus nods slowly. "Then the gods did not trick you. They only told you what you refused to see." The silence that follows feels heavier than any army. The fire crackles softly, throwing shifting light across their faces, the conquerors young and unlined, the fallen kings old and weary. Yet in that glow there's no hatred, no bitterness, only the strange stillness that comes when two fates finally understand each other. In the days that follow, word spreads across the lands, from the Aegean to Babylon, that Sardis has fallen and Lydia's golden king now walks beside his conqueror. The story becomes legend, how Croesus was saved by divine fire, how Cyrus showed mercy where others would have shown wrath. It becomes more than history. It becomes myth, a parable for kings to come. Cyrus allows Croesus to live freely in his court. "You will travel with me," he says. "You will see the world your fall has opened." And so, when Cyrus marches east again, toward Babylon, toward immortality, Croesus rides with him, not as a captive, but as witness. From the ashes of Sardis, two empires rise, one of gold and memory, the other of vision and will. Before leaving, Croesus returns one last time to the Pactolus River. He kneels by the bank where the sand still glitters faintly with traces of electrum. The city is quiet now. The smoke has cleared. He dips his hand into the current. The water is cold, biting. When he lifts it, the gold dust clings to his skin. He watches it glimmer in the sunlight, then lets it fall back into the stream. "You win," he whispers to the river. "I mistook your shine for favour." The water flows on, indifferent. Cyrus waits behind him on horseback. "Ready?" he calls. Croesus stands. "Yes," he says. "I have nothing left to lose, and perhaps that means I finally gained something." The two men ride east, the ruins of Sardis shrinking behind them, until they're just a smear of smoke against the mountains. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls across the plains, the sound of empires shifting, of time resetting its clock, and the fire that spared a king still burns quietly in memory, reminding both rulers and dreamers that fortune is fickle, wisdom is hard-earned, and no prophecy is ever as kind as it sounds. The road east stretches endlessly beneath the hooves of Persian horses, a living thread of dust and dawn that winds through valleys, across mountains and into the heart of empire. You ride with Cyrus the Great, conqueror of kings, and with Croesus, the king once thought unconquerable. The winter winds of Anatolia are behind you now. Ahead lies the vast, sun-bleached horizon of Persia. The two men travel together in silence for long stretches, their bond unspoken but undeniable. They are opposites, one born in hunger, the other in gold, one raised in struggle, the other in luxury. Yet each sees himself reflected in the other's fall and triumph. In the stillness between conversations, you can feel the weight of something larger than victory, a mutual understanding of power's price. At night, when the army camps beneath the stars, Cyrus and Croesus sit by the same fire. No court, no throne, no gold. Just two kings speaking like men. The soldiers whisper about them, these twin legends. The conqueror guided by mercy and the fallen king touched by flame. "Tell me," Cyrus says one evening, turning a coin in his hand, one of Croesus's own electrum pieces taken from the treasury of Sardis. "When you had all the gold of the earth, did it make you feel safe?" Croesus smiles faintly. "Safer than I was," he says, "but never safe enough." He looks at the coin, the lion's head stamped upon it, symbol of his dynasty, and adds, "It was my promise to the world. Every trade, every hand that touched this coin carried my name. But coins are faith, not power, and faith can change sides faster than an army." Cyrus nods, slipping the coin back into his belt. "Then you understand empire," he says. "It's just a larger coin. Faith traded at scale." They laugh quietly together. The laughter fades into the crackle of fire and the distant murmur of soldiers. Days become weeks. The caravan crosses into Persian lands, wild, wide, and untamed. Villages greet them with offerings of bread and milk, their people astonished to see the great king riding beside the golden monarch of Lydia, not as prisoner, but as guest. Word travels faster than hoofbeats. Cyrus spares kings. His mercy becomes its own kind of weapon, sharper than fear, more lasting than blood. Croesus watches the Persians with quiet wonder. These men fight not for coin, but for belief, in Cyrus, in the destiny of their people, in something larger than themselves. "You've built loyalty without gold," he says one day as they climb a ridge overlooking the plains. "That's rarer than treasure." Cyrus smiles. "You built gold without loyalty. That's rarer still." They pause on the ridge. Below them, the land stretches to infinity. Rivers like veins, mountains like bones, and far beyond, the shimmer of distant cities waiting to be brought into the fold. Cyrus looks out at it all, the way a craftsman studies uncarved stone. Every city, he says, every people, they think they stand apart. But the world is one body. My task is to make it whole. Croesus chuckles softly. And if the body rejects the healer, Cyrus glances at him, then the healer must bleed with it. Their friendship grows out of such exchanges, part philosophy, part confession. Croesus finds a strange peace in his downfall. He no longer dreams of gold or empire, only of understanding. When they reach the plains of Ecbatana, where Cyrus keeps his royal residence, the former king walks freely among courtiers and generals who once called him an enemy. The Persians, pragmatic as their ruler, accept him as a counselor, an oracle of failure who speaks with the authority of ruin. In time, Cyrus begins to seek his counsel in all things, not as servant to master, but as one mind to another. What would Lydia have done, he asks, when planning reforms, roads, and taxes? What would Croesus advise? Croesus answers honestly, without flattery. Build as if you will never fall, he says once, but remember that you will. He becomes known in the Persian court as the man who lived through fire. His presence a reminder to ambitious men that victory without humility burns faster than defeat. Years later, when Cyrus stands on the banks of the Tigris, preparing for his next great campaign into Babylon, Croesus walks beside him one last time. The river glitters in the heat, wide and calm, like the Pactolus reborn but stripped of vanity. Cyrus looks toward the horizon, where the spires of Babylon pierce the sky. "Do you believe the gods favour me now?" he asks. Croesus watches the river flow, its current smooth and endless. "The gods favour balance," he says. "When they give too much to one man, they take from another. When they make you great, they will test your mercy. When they grant you peace, they will test your pride. And when they give you all, they will test what you love most." Cyrus listens, his eyes distant. "Then I hope they find me worthy." Croesus smiles, the ghost of his old grandeur flickering for just a moment. "You already are." Just don't forget what the fire taught us both. They stand in silence as the sun sinks behind the mountains, the water turning to molten gold. 2 kings, one destiny completed, another just beginning. When the march resumes the next morning, Croesus rides behind the Persian standard. No longer a king of gold, but a keeper of wisdom. His legend will fade, his empire gone, but his story will remain. A warning whispered to rulers for centuries. Fortune is not a god to be worshipped. It is a wind, warm when it lifts you, cold when it leaves. The years drift softly onward, and the story of Sardis settles into the hush of memory. Time smooths its sharpest edges, turning battlefields into meadows and ashes into soil. You walk again through the valley of the Pactolus, and though centuries have passed, the water still whispers faintly against the stones. Somewhere beneath the sand, threads of gold still gleam. The same dust that once crowned a kingdom, now just glitter beneath the stream. The world remembers the fall differently depending on who tells it. The Persians remember the courage of Cyrus, who conquered with reason instead of rage. The Greeks remember Croesus, the golden king whose wealth could not buy a single day more of peace. And the rest of us remember both, the rise and the ruin, the lesson carved into stone and story alike. Sardis is rebuilt in time. The walls rise again, the markets hum once more, and pilgrims come to stand on the same cliffs where the Persians climbed. They look down at the plains where empires met, and for a heartbeat they hear it. The clash of swords, the thunder of hooves, the cries of men who believed their gods would never let them fall. The wind that rolls through the valley carries that sound like a secret. Cyrus's empire grows vast, stretching from the Aegean to the Indus. He founds cities, builds roads, and writes laws that will outlive him. He's remembered as Shansha, king of kings, not for the lands he took, but for the mercy he showed. And in the quiet corners of his court, an older man sometimes walks beside him, eyes pale with memory, hands scarred from chains that no longer bind. That man is Croesus, who once sat upon a golden throne and now prefers a wooden bench by the fire. He teaches princes that gold can blind, that victory can rot from the inside, that no crown is heavier than certainty. Children in the Persian court call him the man who spoke to fire. When he dies, Cyrus orders a small tomb built for him beside a river that runs clear as glass. Not the Pactolus, that chapter is over, but another nameless stream that murmurs the same eternal truth. All rivers return to the sea, all kings return to dust, and yet Croesus lives on, not in temples or treasures, but in the quiet warning his story leaves behind. When future rulers grow too proud, their counselors will whisper his name like a prayer. Remember Croesus. The ruins of Sardis will one day crumble, the empire of Cyrus will fade, and even their gods will fall silent. But the lesson remains, soft as wind, sharp as wisdom. You can own gold, but you can't own time. You can command men, but not fortune. And if you ever believe you're untouchable, the gods will remind you, gently at first, then with fire. The valley grows quiet again. The air cools. The night rolls in on the wings of a slow breeze that smells of cedar and river water. You listen, eyes half closed, as the world exhales its story. A story of kings and empires, of pride and patience, of fortune's fickle flame. And as the stars bloom above the sleeping hills of Anatolia, you hear the last whisper of the old world fading into peace. Gold glitters, fire burns, and both, in the end, are only light. So close your eyes now. Let the wind carry you downstream. The wars are over, the city's quiet, and somewhere far away the gods are smiling, softly, knowingly, as the world turns once more beneath their silent gaze. So now the fires have cooled, and the gold of Sardis lies quiet beneath centuries of dust. The noise of war, the clash of swords, the cries of kings, all of it has dissolved into the hush of the valley night. Only the river keeps speaking, whispering through its stones the old story of pride and mercy, of a king who lost everything, and a conqueror who chose compassion instead of wrath. You can almost feel the warmth of those forgotten embers against your skin, not burning now, only glowing softly, like the heartbeat of time itself. The stars hang low over Anatolia, bright and unjudging, the same ones that watched Croesus rise and Cyrus reign. The wind drifts gently through the ruins, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and cedar, the memory of incense, the ghost of gold dust. The world has changed 1,000 times since that day, but the lesson never fades, that wealth can dazzle the eyes, but only wisdom endures, that mercy, not victory, builds empires that last. So breathe deeply, and let that truth settle. The noise of ambition, the shimmer of fortune, they're only passing lights on a river that never stops flowing. Somewhere out there, the Pactolus still glints in moonlight, washing over forgotten coins, polishing them smooth again. And if you listen closely past the sigh of the water and the hush of the hills, you might hear it, the quiet laughter of the gods, content that their lesson was finally heard. Sleep now, traveller. Sardis is safe again. The fire has become warmth and the gold just light. Good night, sweet dreams.